I told you that my role has been made redundant. I'm sure some of you have been wondering what next, what's going to happen to me. I've had a lot of persons ask me, I have a lot of persons reach out to me. Well, life is consistent in one thing, change is the only consistent thing. One of the things that actually happens is that I've asked myself, because life is consistent and change is consistent, what happens if probably I get a very inconsistent happening in my life where there's no job coming up again? And that made me to think a lot about the future of my children. Today, I want to discuss about how you can secure the financial future of your children while you are still in employment. I've made a lot of researches. I've had to talk to some insurance companies. I've talked to First Bank, for example. I'll give you more detail of that in subsequent discussions. And today I have a very good friend of mine here who is a colleague, a friend, and because of the way we behave in the office, we've also turned to brothers. He has, the first time that issue came up for me to start thinking about securing the financial future of my children was a discussion we're having on our way home. So I'll just let him introduce himself and tell us slightly a bit about what he is doing about securing the financial future of his own children.
Hi everyone, my name is Uko, and glad to chat about what to do, to secure the future of your children. So first of all, it's very important for us to understand that whatever we are doing, bringing these kids into the world is a choice. And so while we are in employment, while we are having the opportunity to make a living, while we're still virile, agile, then we need to think about some of those things that we need to put in place. Of course, you may be aware that some financial institutions provide, children targeted financial products. So they could be in the form of, savings products where you're able to put in certain amount of money every other month or periodically, as the case may be, based on your negotiation with your financial institution. And that goes into supporting your kids' education. Sometimes, depending on the way the product is designed, you may be required to allow a certain duration of investments, and then you're able to, in return, get certain percentages, off your, children's school fees, as the case may be, or sometimes you are able to even win, free school fees for your kids for, a period of time. But beyond that, of course, you may also have known that in the last 2 years, prior to COVID and, post-COVID, we're already having, issues with the rates that are going into such financial products. And as such, some of them, because of the way they are designed, you're not able to get more than 1% to 1.5% interest rates. So it's worth thinking about other products. So I discovered that there is an opportunity for us to support our kids, lay up treasures for them, or some start of support for them through life policy. So we will be talking life policy.
So can you tell us your journey? How did you go about finding the right policy for your children? Were the options presented to you, and how did you make a final decision?
It started off with discussions, discussions with friends, conversations with colleagues, But I recall post-COVID and just before I joined, this organization, I just recalled, getting a note from, my in-law saying, "Oh, there's something I want to talk to you about. There's this package that I think you would really appreciate." A lot of, policies, life policies, usually would have certain restrictions, but he just offered to, share this dynamic product, and he just said, "Oh, I'll introduce you to someone who will talk to you more about it." And so that was the journey, to how, the introduction was done via email. We started the conversation with the insurance agent, and we went through a whole session where the agent was able to take me through, the product and how flexible it is.
What are some of the questions one need to ask when looking for an insurance policy for the children?
Yeah.
Or what are some of the things to look at?
Yeah. So basically, a life policy. Sometimes we have, for instance, when you're in employment, there's what is called, group life, which is what the organization offers to those, to staff and, other categories of employees, for the purposes where if you, let's say, life happens in the course of your duties, or in the course of carrying out your duties, then the insurance company is able to, pay certain, benefits based on the negotiations with the organization. But of course, that is only limited to, when you are within an employment. And then for some other policies, it is tied to a period of where you put in the premium, you keep subscribing, and until it gets to maturity, before your children could benefit from it. But I was introduced to a product where it's flexible, and so you're able to break your benefits into bits. So for instance, if you're going to pay the premium for, you could have a periodic break period where you look at what you've done maybe in the first 3 years, and at that break point it's to say, okay, you've gained this much in the first 3 years, so would you want to take what has come as profit, or would you want to roll it over and continue? So let's say you're putting in your premium for 10 years, and the first 3 years you decide to pause and look at what it has, what has accrued, and then you want to maybe take off, the interest on it, and then roll over the, main capital. Like you have. So the beauty of this product is that you have the opportunity of, exploring different options. So if you're doing for 15 years, it gives you an option of every 5 years will tell you how much you have accrued, and so you decide to continue, or you would want to take whatever has accrued in the first 5 years and continue, roll this over. So it also gives, so that's the beauty of, a flexible plan. So, and of course, we need to look at this from the point where the investment, first of all, apart from the fact that, life could happen, is also the fact that you're making an investment for a time where your kids could be grown enough to go to college. And so at that point, maybe in 10 years you're no longer very active, or maybe you're incapacitated, so at that point you're able to look back at that investment. Even while you're alive, you're not thinking about, where do I raise the funds for this child to, go to college. So you're already having, based on the investments you've made over that period, you're able to draw a significant amount. And so if you're consistent and within the period that you've agreed with the institution, 10 years, 15 years, that's a whole lot of money. It's almost like you get as much as 3 times what you've put in, in terms of premium for the duration. So the other thing about, investing in a life policy is, yes, you could still be alive, and at that point you need funds to get the kids enrolled in college, so that's not a big problem. Like, you're able to recoup these investments, get the kids in college. And the other side of it is, assuming life happens when you start subscribing and putting in these funds for the premium, automatically the company, based on what the product is designed for, says, okay, we are going to pay this assured sum. So if you're getting into this plan, and then you have, let's say you're going to be contributing up to 15 million within the period that you've agreed, because the first thing is, a lot of calculations have to be done from the point of enrollment, with the financial institution. A lot of calculations are done. First is looking at your age at the point of enrollment, and they're also going to be looking at, certain basic medical, information about the person. So of course you're getting into these investments with, so they understand that, maybe you don't have a terminal ailment, or, so all of that, put aside. Let's assume life happens. The sum that you are short. So let's say you're going to put in 15 million in, a couple of years, and maybe in 10 years or 15 years, and you were supposed to get like maybe 27 or 30 million or 35 million in all. So if it happens that your sum assured is, 20 million, and you started subscribing, and the next month life happens, your family automatically benefits from your sum, the assured sum. So it's not like, so the idea is, if life happens, your family has what to fall back on. We're not struggling with, oh, my kids can no longer go to school because that is no longer, there. So it's really like, putting that buffer for your children or your family to be assured that, and some products also even guarantee, interment plans. So like, okay, life happens, you don't need to go and pull from this investment to start thinking about, the interment or, homegoing. So you start from the company saying, okay, this is what we are providing first for the burial rights, and then thereafter let's talk about, what you are entitled to, for the family. Some basic things that we also need to do as those who are subscribing for this kind of products, because we've seen situations where the subscriber passes on and the kids are struggling because certain considerations were not made about, things as basic as next of kin.
Thank you. Yeah, that I did have a conversation with First Bank of Nigeria, with the First Bank of Nigeria Insurance, and then what they also talk about next of kin, actually. And in terms of cost, it will surprise you to realize that Uko has been mentioning millions and millions, that actually you can start with as minimum as 5,000 naira monthly. And if you take 5,000 times 12, that's 60,000 naira a year, and multiply that times 5 years, 60 times 5, and compare with the benefits you are going to have after that. And what they actually mentioned was that in case within 6 months after you start and something happens, life happens, they will be willing to provide 10% every year for the number of the duration of your of the policy you wanted to insure. So 10% of the child's tuition fees, which I think comes with a lot of benefits. Now let's ask you, what's the name of the insurance company you're using? Is it something you can share?
So yeah, so I run with two companies. I have one with AXA, Mansard, and one with I Insurance. And yeah, hopefully at some point, yeah, we'll get someone, you know, from ICO to really do justice to these products. So I was just using the examples in terms of, you know, how much in terms of what you want to invest and what you want to get. There is the flexibility for you to start with what you're able to afford, because it's about what you're able to set aside for the benefit of your family, your children also. So the first factor that is usually considered is age. So they start, you know, the company will first of all look at, you know, at what age are you starting this. And so they now look at, okay, from your age to when you're supposed to retire, let's say 60 or thereabout, you know, how long do you have to be active? So are you willing to go all the way, or you want to do it, you know, maybe you want to do half of, you know, to your retirement. So it's a conversation. It's flexible, just to encourage you to be able to do that. So if you ask, you know, what motivated you, I once attended an event that was organized by an organization, you know, some years back, and it was a world, it was a day to set aside to celebrate widows. I think World Widowhood Day. And I saw, you know, the number of young women who were already widows, and again, a large number of them in that event were actually wives of service men who had passed on in active service. So, and, you know, like, these women were helpless. So, you know, a lot of them with kids, and a lot of them were, maybe in the first instance, they were housewives. And so being back at home, supporting the kids to be in school while their husbands were in, you know, in service, you know, securing the country. And unfortunately, life happened. And then I got to realize that a lot of them, they brought the authorities, the security authorities to that event. And the essence was to actually get to hear, the authorities to hear the views of these widows, and, you know, find ways of supporting them or helping them out of their situation. And it was very clear. The authorities said, look, it depends on what your husband put down as next of kin. You know, we work based on the information we are provided. So if the man had put in his brother to be his next of kin, or he had put in his friend to be his next of kin, apparently when life happens, the authorities will be looking for who was indicated as next of kin. And so we could see that, you know, a lot of these women were helpless, not because there was nothing the system could do for them, but because of the sort of documentation that was provided at the point they were, you know, their husbands were enrolled. And so it became a real, you know, issue. I mean, we heard you know, some very horrible stories of how even some of the women knew those who were indicated as next of kin.
I think this is a very, very serious thing to take into consideration, especially for those of us who are from this very part of the world. I'm talking about Africa, I'm talking about Nigeria. The best person that can take care of your child, or the child that you've left, is either the father or the mother, not the relatives. I think next of kin have to be a third option. And so it's, as a human resource person, sometimes when you look at the documentations and you leave who would be your next of kin, you find out that the percentage of a certain policy that will be given, you find out that people tend to go outside their spouses, which is actually not right. But women, many of them would rather put their husband.
Yeah.
So the best person that can take care of your child when you leave or when things go rough is actually your spouse. So that's something I'll kindly ask us to take into consideration.
Yeah, so just to say that, you know, first it starts from dealing with, you know, the issues like we've talked about. You need to really be explicit about your next of kin. And of course, with life policies, there's also the provision for contingency. Let's say in the event where the subscriber and the next of kin, so let's say the subscriber and the spouse, you know, passed on, and the kids are still very young. So there's the opportunity that there should be a contingency, you know, there's a contingent person who will be, you know, approached, you know, of course, certain, and usually, whatever is done between the company and the institution and the beneficiaries will be based on what you documented at the point of subscribing, you know. And of course, it's flexible enough that at any point you notice that certain things need to be added or reviewed, there's an opportunity to go back to, you know, your customer officer to say, look, I want to work on my documentation. And of course, gone are the days where we didn't have you know, regulatory, you know, the regulations were not very strong, you know, within our client. But now we have good regulators, you know, the regulation is good, and so there's guarantee that whatever your investments are secured, so you don't have to worry about what happens if, you know, there are companies who, you know, there are institutions that are set up to take over those liabilities, you know, in the event that maybe even, let's say the company you have your subscription runs into issues. There are also other, you know, the regulators are there to go through a process where those liabilities are taken over. So I think for us, you know, let's face reality. You know, in this part of the world, we are very religious people, so you always hear people say, oh, you know, nothing happens, nothing will happen to me, God is on it. Yeah, I also believe that God is supreme and is protecting us, but in the face of that, let's face reality. You need to put, you know, certain buffers in place for your family. I mean, if you've ever witnessed how a family that has lost a breadwinner struggles, then, you know, something should tell you that, look, I need to avoid this kind of situation. I need to be able to put in something for my children. Of course, there are other products with, you know, some of these companies that when you get to the point where your premium is, you know, is matured, you're supposed to reap the benefits, there are several other options that you can decide to plow those funds into. So let's say, you know, you get to a point you're also able to, you've worked so hard, you have the funds to send the kids to school. It's not about their schooling. It could actually also be that once they graduate, they have something that they can start life with. Or you could, you know, decide to pull out all of that at maturity and say, okay, I'm going to set aside, you know, or invest in real estate for, you know, the future of these children. You know, so in all, it's about having that knowledge to be able to help, you know, ourselves at certain points in life. And so also if life happens, then, you know, the children are not struggling, the family is not struggling, there's something to fall back on. I mean, that's the best investment we can leave behind for our children, for our families.
Yes, that is, well, talking about some people can be very religious. There's a story of a prophet who died, and then he left a widow and a son that was almost taken away.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, so you just raised a very a point that also brings something if you don't trust your next of kin, I mean, I'm talking of outside your spouse, or you don't have a spouse, probably a single parent, you can look for a lawyer who would be able to handle that after your death. I do understand that, yes, lawyers could be expensive, but you can shop around to find some lawyers who will be willing to actually support you when that happens. That could secure the future of your children. At this rate, life is very consistent with change, and some change are not consistent with our own well-being.
Yeah.
So I would advise all of us while we are still working to start thinking of those options. I have seen in my career where young ladies actually come presenting themselves and wanting to have a job at all costs, even if it means some of them have actually made those statements openly, even if it means having to have a lay with them. But that's how bad it could be. And some of them, their stories could be so pathetic. Their parents were well-to-do, and that happened that way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Uko, for coming. And thank you. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. Ask questions, and I'll be looking forward in the future to also get real. Uko is a colleague. He's not an insurance expert, but he has just that he is living it. He has invested in it, and that's why I just thought for us to also hear from him as I was thinking through